In the adventures book I just read, Gathering Blue by Lewis Lowry, I believe that Kira, the protagonist, shows much strength, courage, loyalty, and bravery. I enjoyed reading this amazing story. I find it helpful to those who don't have that much courage, and will possibly help them believe in themselves and strive to become what they want to become. These are my thoughts on how Kira portrayed strength in this book, filled with mysteries, adventures, and hardships that this one young threader endured. The first act of strength that Kira showed was when her mother was lying ill in a measly bed in a small cot. During this trying point in Kira's life, Kira had to stay loyal to her mother by collecting food, making food for her mother, fetching water for her mother, keeping her mother clean and as healthy as she could. Even though Kira was young, she took great responsibility of taking care of herself and her mother. I think I would have had a hard time staying strong when my mother was that sick, and I respect that in Kira. Another noble act Kira performed was conquering the massive amount of disparity and depression of her mother being brought out to the field once she had passed on, and having to guard her souls as they flew on into another world. I would probably have broken down at that point and not have had enough stamina, courage, or self-confidence to face Kira's next, out of many roadblocks, situations with Vandera and the wicked women of her village. This next situation, Kira had to act so much older than she was. She had to instantly move on from her mother's death and try to scrape together the last remains of her now burnt-down cot. While she was doing this, Vandera, a mean, scornful woman, and the other cruel women of the village came to Kira with rocks in hand, ready to strike. These women wanted to have Kira's cot for their own and to store their eggs and chickens in, while thinking that Kira shouldn't be allowed to live just because of her crippled leg. This to me is absurd. First of all, putting your children with your chickens in pens just so you didn't have to deal with them is crazy. And then, second of all, going against your neighbor just because you want their land is even worse. Back to the story. Kira wouldn't have anywhere to go if she left and would be taken by beasts. So of course, she defied them and said no, and that she would not leave. The women were outraged. They thought themselves higher than Kira, but before they could wind up and whip their rocks at Kira with another massive amount of willpower and wittiness, Kira outsmarted them and stated that they could be executed for killing a girl without bringing the situation to the Council of Edifice. The women thought this through and came to the conclusion that the situation was not worth risking their lives for, and stood down. Vandera, however, was determined. I don't see why she just didn't let the poor girl live and the subject drop, but of course she had to bring the subject to court. Now we are at the point of Kira's trial with Vandera. During this time, she had to have pure mental strength and physical strength. It's outstanding how Kira can endure all this. My head would be swimming at that time. But first, for mental strength, she had to be strong by standing up to Vandera and orally outsmarting her and give the council the reason for why she should be able to live. Also to be brave, even though she was fighting for her life against a much older woman who had fought against beasts with a scar to prove it. She must have been intimidating. For the physical strength, though, Kira had to endure the long and trying trial with her crippled leg hurting the whole time. Sometimes she wasn't sure what to do, but desperately wanted to sit. She was strong and held through them. So, even though there were all these roadblocks to Kira winning this trial, even I wasn't sure what would happen. Kira was allowed to live after all and stay at the edifice building and be the official weaver for the singer's room. Now that was a shock. While staying at the edifice building, Kira became bored of weaving and remaking only what she was told to weave on the rope, instead of having the freedom of creating things of her own imagination. It would have bored me too. Kira again showed strength by sticking with weaving the rope with the hopes of one day being able to change the story in the rope to make the village's life better. She wasn't doing it herself, but for others. True unselfishness. Another show of immense strength and determination was how, just to learn the dyes from Annabella, the old woman who knew all the plants and the colors of the dyes they make, Kira would walk the long, treacherous hours through the path in the woods, even though the scary stories of beasts haunt her and her crippled leg, making it longer and more difficult to walk. Later in the story, we find Annabella believes there are no beasts, and that not long after that, she comes to the end of her life with a sudden death. This brought sorrow to Kira. She would also have no other source for dyeing threads now. Good thing she had a friend Thomas, the carver of the singer's staff, to write them all down for her. Otherwise, she might be lost. Kira's final act of courage and responsibility came when she gave up the satisfying life of living with her father in the happy village where handicapped people were cherished to stay behind in the cruel village where hurt people usually are sent to death, and where the awful Jameson was who tried to kill Kira's father, just to be able to possibly change the future of the villages so they could be cleaner, nicer, healthier, and a happier place by weaving stories into the road. Also to be with Matt and Joe, her friends, to make sure no harm came to them, and even bringing her father to justice by standing up to Jameson possibly. These acts all show the strength, courage, loyalty, responsibility, and bravery Kira shows throughout this book. I respect Kira for being able to do all this, even though she was orphaned and had a twisted leg. It really shows that even though you aren't perfect, you can always keep believing and do your best and accomplish anything if you keep on trying.